I have a new subject that is close to you, but I thought about me. Did you see the World Health Organization at the end of August 2020 said polio has been completely eradicated?
I did.
You are someone who got polio, I don't know, or had polio.
Yeah, yeah.
What does it feel like to know that potentially there will be no more people that have your condition?
Um, well, let me start by saying that I think there was nothing good, inherently good about polio. I mean, it killed people and it paralyzed people. And I know that we take our view about the impact of impairments on our lives, me and you, and we tend to see them in a very positive way a lot of the time. Not always. There are times when being in a wheelchair isn't convenient, you know. But polio in itself, as a virus, a bit like, and it is very similar to COVID in a number of ways, or coronavirus. Um, I'm glad to see the back of it. I don't think it it may have, and I would say this about myself, it has made me who I am, and I'm in that sense, I believe it's helped me see a world very differently. But I don't wish it on people. I don't think there's anything inherently good about polio, so that's good. The thing that's interesting is that the last place it was there are still Pakistan, I think, and Afghanistan still have a strain, but it's very small. But you're right, Africa completely gone now. And when I think about Africa and all the struggles it's had and the way it tries very hard to, you know, to change its own story, to have got polio out of the way can't be anything but good news.
I get what you're saying. Absolutely. I'm trying to think. Then when we have people who say my condition is the problem, the social model's not going to help me, I want to get rid of my condition. You can sometimes struggle with that. You're like, no, we get rid of your barriers and you'll be okay. But you're almost saying the condition itself is inherently an issue. There's nothing good. So other people could say that the same about their condition.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, yeah. I think what's trying to think this through a bit. It's saying that I don't think my life would have been anything like the same had I not had polio. That's a given. It would. We you know we recently talked to Jeff, didn't we? Jeff Adams Spink, about thalidomide and the impact on that generation. Polio for my generation was devastating. It killed thousands. It paralyzed thousands. But as a result of that, many people's lives were changed. I'm not saying for the better or for the worse, but they were changed. And it's what you make of it that I think matters. So it's one thing to be working with a body that doesn't obey you, doesn't do what you wish it would do. It's quite another to not be allowed on a bus because you can't walk onto it. That's a very different concept.
Absolutely. Now, using the old matrix bit and the clumsiness for thalidomide, would you take the blue pill or to be cured, to get rid of it, or would you not take a pill full stop? It is what it is. That's what I've got.
I wouldn't take any pill now. I would have at 14 or 15 because I found polio an absolute nightmare and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And for all the usual reasons that an adolescent boy might. So all that stuff. And there have been moments in my life where I wish I didn't have it. There were times when my sons, particularly my sons, they, you know, the football thing and not being able to play, that kind of thing with them, that annoyed me. And dancing with my wife, you know, can't do that. Those kinds of things annoy me, but they're moments. My life overall has been, for me at least, has been a really interesting and fulfilling prospect. I mean, I've done stuff that I wouldn't have done if I hadn't had polio. I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have been doing this. I wouldn't have met all the people I've met. I wouldn't have had the roles I've had. I wouldn't have traveled to the places I've been if I hadn't had polio. I might have been something else. I used to say that my life script for my class, when I was born in central London, working class family, all that stuff. The milieu, the group that I grew up with are mainly, or spent many of their formative years in prisons. And I think in some ways, polio saved me from that, because I'm sure my brother went to jail. I'm sure I would have ended up in the cell along the landing from him. Although I used to say to him, I was a lot cleverer than him, so I wouldn't get caught. But but the idea that, for me, I've reframed it. It's a bit like we were saying about James. You know, it's about how you see the positive aspects of this, and you value those rather than thinking about the things I can't do. And there are things I can't do, and I wish I could do, but I wouldn't
I
take the pill.
I've used my impairment to get me out of dancing with my partner. I can't stand dancing, but I get the, you know, my dad's very good at sport, and I remember asking him, "Were you disappointed I couldn't do some of the sporting things?" Because I've got all the hand-eye coordination, I've got the technical gifts that he's got, but I haven't got the physical bit. I thank you, and thank you for the honesty. It is fascinating. It's a short person's conversation that we have, and ours is different in that I'm sure there are short people who go, "I really wish this wasn't me."
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's people who are absolutely fine, but have had little moments, like you say, where you go, "Oh, damn it, this is really tough." But we're very proud. And the idea that we may disappear, or genetically they find things to stop it happening. And now, obviously, the pain, the discomfort, the surgeries, the breathing, the early death, all the crappy stuff, the cancers. I wish we didn't have that, but I don't want my type to disappear. And
I can understand that. I can understand that. I think, as you say, it is different, isn't it? One thing, for many people with polio, for example, they were in their 20s when they got it. You know, they weren't born with it. And I got it
yeah,
when I was very young. I was 3. So, but for you and people with your condition, it is a birth issue. You are born small. So it is, the only way of dealing with that is to stop you being born in the first place. And that's a different ball game.
although they're
We
looking at,
just rule out the chances of people catching polio. We don't rule out the people. You know, it's a different thing.
yes, good point. I have several short friends who've had babies, and their babies are short, and we're like, yay. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
I've been very irresponsible. I need to have knocked out a few kids, I think, just to keep it going. Yeah, I'm curious. I don't know what it is. I think your point about this is your polio, it's not an illness, but it's a thing that brought a lot of difficulty. Now, mine brings a lot of difficulty too, but it's not a bolt on. It's an inherent part. There's nothing. I wasn't meant to be different. I was meant. This is how it was meant to be. Whereas you could argue you caught something, or you got something, or whatever it is that altered that. A bit like James as well. James did say he's an 18-year-old just been accepted at Oxford, was just about to have his gap year. That's a very, very different life to what he ended up doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we can't ask him, but I suspect that James's life took a very different turn, and thousands of people benefited because of that.
I think there is a question we should ask. I remember going to an event where Colin Lowe, who is a lord, isn't he?
Yeah,
And
yes, yeah.
he did
Blind Lord.
he did a lovely title. It was "Has Disability Rights Gone Too Far?" And it was, you know, provocative. I chatted with Liz Sace afterwards outside, and we were doing this, you know, is it ever good to have a disability, or is it a better? And we doing this very similar to conversation to it. And I clumsily said something like, "Well, you know, but depression can't be good because, you know, that's not a good thing to have something like depression." And she countered by saying, "But going through that gives you a perspective. It might give you a different outlook. It makes you a different person. That could be an improved person." So it's a sort of clumsy way of me trying to get to the point of, we assume is it good or bad, and it's not. It's complex, and certain conditions can make you a different person, can make you appreciate, may give you. I was interviewed about being short, and I said it's opened more doors than it's closed.
Yeah.
And I sort of believe that is the case.
I think some of this is also about where we start from. So you grow up in a family that take a view, they do things, they make sure that you go through a decent education, they do all that stuff. So you emerge, and then in one sense, it's now what you make of it. It's now what you make of it. There will be, I don't know, I've not met many small people, for example, who perhaps were born into poverty, who didn't get the all that kind of stuff. So their life chances were also very limited because of all of that. And then they had to manage being small as well in a world which, by and large, is not very friendly to people who are different. So,
but you come back to our fundamental point, which is impairment and your condition is one thing, your life chances, where you were born, what your family were like, and then how that has created you as a personality. You will have 5 people with exactly the same condition as me, but our life has been different through other factors, and we're back to the nature nurture. And you're quite right.
What you want is a world which treats whichever group you came from, treats you fairly, i.e. it doesn't restrict you. I know the big debate in our society now isn't about, class is a big issue, particularly in the UK. So,
You're right. And I wasn't destined for a life of criminality. I can't see how
I'm very angry that I didn't ever get to see the inside of a prison. It's just been awful. Polio,
with you. Once you've shot the 17th parakeet, you may well get your chance. I wouldn't. A couple of stray bullets, you'll be there before you know it.
Yes, 10 years on the moor, breaking up rocks.
Thank you. I was struck to see it disappear, and if ever I read that about dwarfism, I think there's too many complications with my condition, and the genetics and the spontaneity and the randomness and all of that. But in a couple 100 years, could it have gone through science? And that'd be a sad day in my head, at least.
In some ways, what you want is small people to be born that don't have any of the other stuff that comes with it. So they could just be small. You don't want the hips and the knees and all that stuff.
And that's what the smart biopharmacists say. Oh, that's all we're doing. And you go, okay, how are you going to achieve that? And they go, well, we're going to make you a lot taller. And you go, oh, bugger. No, it's tricky, that. As a slight aside, and here's a really random bit, I do have an ISA. I have some savings and investments. And opportunist me realized there is a company that are developing a vaccine for COVID.
All right.
And I thought, well, that's the one to invest in, isn't it? Unfortunately, in that same little trust is a company that make the altering gene that would stop dwarfism. And I can't go there. I cannot fund something that is going to make...
So they won't be getting your money.
No. And I think that will change the whole path of that multi-billion pharmaceutical
they will
company.
be bust by tomorrow.